Welcome everybody to the Alfred Research Alliance Honours Night. I'm Steve Jane, the Dean of the Subfaculty of Translational Medicine and Public Health at the Alfred Precinct. And I hope by the end of the evening I'll have convinced you that there's nowhere else you'd like to do your honours for 2021 than at this precinct. Firstly, I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we're all meeting and to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. Next slide, please. So over the course of the next hour or so, you're going to meet some of the superstars of research at the precinct, and the spectrum of research that's delivered here is encapsulated on this slide. There's really an enormous breadth of what is offered, from basic and translational research through to clinical trials and registries, occupational environmental health, biomarkers, drug discovery, devices. Any flavour of research you like, you will be able to find it on this precinct. And not only the flavour that you like, also delivered by some of the world's leading experts in their particular fields. It doesn't really matter whether you want to do wet lab at a bench, clinical work, environmental work, statistics, public health, whatever your research bent is, you'll find it at this precinct, both within the two schools that Monash University has established here, the School of Public Health and Preventive Medicine and the Central Clinical School, but also with our two research partners, the Baker Institute and the Burnet Institute, and of course, the cornerstone of all of this being the Alfred Hospital, where all of the research institutes interface. So, as I mentioned, who are we? We are a conglomerate of research powerhouses, the two institutes, the two schools and the Alfred. And you can see here we are all neatly aligned in a single precinct in a stone's throw from the city in the heart of Paran, a superb place to be able to do your honours year. As I mentioned, the range of disciplines on offer here are incredibly diverse, everything from leadership in cardiovascular disease, infectious diseases, public health, and every medical discipline that you could possibly imagine, from hematology to diabetes, respiratory medicine, and so on. Really something for anyone, and I think whatever interest you have, you'll find it is provided for you here in spades. So we have a stellar lineup tonight. Not only the honours coordinators are here, and we'll have representatives of each of the groups talking to you, but we also have a large number of heads of departments who are going to talk to you about research within their specific discipline, and then the opportunity after that to directly question both the honours coordinators and the discipline leaders about what their research programs are like and what are the sorts of projects that they could offer you. And I've listed here the honours coordinators from the Central Clinical School, Christophe, Margaret and Vilja up the top, and Darshini, Danny and Joanne down the bottom. As I said, all available or representatives of which will be here to talk to you tonight. So apart from the breathtaking lineup of outstanding research that's available to you, we love the precinct, and who wouldn't? Despite the lockdown, we sit in one of the most superb and vibrant precincts in the country, with the surrounds of Faulkner Park, Albert Park Lake, coffee shops that we can't go to, shops that we can't go to, record stores that we can't go to, but hopefully by the time you all start your honours, those things will all be open and available to you, and you will embrace the precinct and its surrounds. And I always like to contrast what's offered at the Paran precinct with what you can get at the Clayton precinct, shown on the next slide. Factories, burnt out cars and busy roads. That's Clayton for you. So compelling reasons why, in addition to the great science that's on offer here, you should think about coming to the Alfred Precinct to do your honours next year. Why wouldn't you? It's a lifestyle choice, if nothing else. So as I mentioned, an incredible experience here. What will you gain apart from that awesome experience? Well, when I say world-class research, it's really not blowing the horn. It is superb research with leaders in so many disciplines here. And I think that's really been evidenced by the responsibility the government has placed on many leaders of research in this precinct during the COVID crisis. Alan Cheng, as you know, is the Deputy Chief Medical Officer for Victoria, comes from the School of Public Health and Preventive Medicine. Many of the leading COVID trials are being orchestrated and led by people on this precinct. And it's not just us saying we're good, it's people from our government and our community placing their trust in us to do research that's critical in a time of need. There's an opportunity, I think, based on that to make a real difference. One thing we pride ourselves on is our translational capabilities, and translation means we deliver from the bench or the desk into the bedside, into the patient with a shorter time frame as possible. And so the research translates into real outcomes for patients and their illnesses and diseases. And that's something I think as medical researchers we all aspire to. So not only do you get exposure to these leaders, but you also get training and mentoring by these people. And if you decide to go on for higher degree research, then it's very handy to have people of this caliber in your corner to mentor you through in the early stages of your career. So as I said, translation I think is encapsulated in this slide, and it's now a bit dated. House I think has disappeared off the airwaves, but essentially it's the movement from mouse to house, or the ability to take basic and applied research, clinical research, into patient outcomes, as I refer to, and all of the partners listed on the bottom deliver that in spades. So there are scholarships available. The Alfred Research Alliance provides 2 scholarships of $6,000 each. There's a website for you to look at. And I, with great pleasure, hand you over to the leaders of research on the precinct who will, as I said, give you compelling reasons as to why this should be your choice, your preference for doing your honours year next year at the Alfred Research Alliance. Best of luck to all of you in very difficult times, but we look forward to seeing as many of you as we possibly can next year. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Stephen. And welcome again to the information evening today. My name is Lakshanie Wickramasinghe, and I am one of the co-hosts for today's session. We really hope you enjoyed the diverse research that will be shared tonight, and it inspires you to come and join us to work at this precinct, because it really is a wonderful site. So without further delay, I'd like to introduce you to, next slide please, Shamila, to the head of the Central Clinical School and the Program Director of Alfred Brain, Professor Terence O'Brien.
Thank you, Lakshanie, and welcome all virtually to the Alfred Precinct. It's fantastic to see so many of you online, almost 400, which is significantly more than we used to get, despite busing you all the way from Clayton and feeding you with pizza. So no pizza tonight, but hopefully you'll get excited by what this fabulous research experience you can have in the Alfred Precinct. So as our Dean, Professor Jane mentioned, I'm the sub-faculty of Public Health and Translational Medicine. Consists of 2 schools, and these are 2 of the biggest schools in the faculty, particularly when it comes to research income. My school is the Central Clinical School, and the other school is the School of Public Health and Preventive Medicine. So the 2 schools really cover the whole spectrum of translational research. And as Professor Jane mentioned, translational research is the 2-way process of taking biomedical discoveries and translating them through preclinical and clinical trials into improved treatments and outcomes for patients. But it also goes the other way. It also involves clinicians, astute clinicians, recognising where there are problems and gaps in care, and collaborating with the basic scientists and to understand the mechanisms underlying those problems and devise new treatments, and then test them and bring them back through the clinical development pathway. And we go everywhere from the very basic side of that right through to the outcome research to assess the efficacy and cost effectiveness of new treatments in patients. The Central Clinical School focuses on the left, particularly on the left-hand side of this translation. So we have within our school basic scientists doing very cutting-edge molecular and other studies, uncovering the fundamental basis of human disease. And we also have translational scientists who are collaborating with people designing new drugs and testing new drugs in animal models, and then passing them into first in human clinical trials, and then ultimately larger scale clinical trials and registries to ultimately become new treatments for patients. As reflective of the clinical hospitals that we're embedded with, we have research groups that work in just about any area of human health that you might be interested in, from neuroscience and mental health, anesthesia, surgery, infectious diseases, imaging, immunology, diabetes, cardiology, sexual health. We have the leading sexual health research centre in the country and arguably the world. Respiratory disease, gastroenterology, critical care, haematology, trauma, ageing, just to name a few. And as Professor Jane also mentioned, and you'll hear later today, we have heads of departments of our 16 departments, each focused on one of the particular areas of clinical and translational medicine, who are clinician scientists, almost all of them, which means they have research that transcends from the basic molecular studies through to clinical research. And within each of our departments, there are also basic scientists as well as pure clinical researchers. So you get the full spectrum, and you'll hear from many of these outstanding clinician scientists as they talk about each of their own departments later in the evening. So Professor Jane already highlighted this. One of the fantastic things about doing your honours year with us on this in this school and this precinct is you get to work with some of the leading clinician scientists and translational scientists in the country. Just to boast, we have over 30 NHMRC investigator grant holders, which is the new scheme by the NHMRC to recognise and fund the very best researchers in the country. There is no precinct in the country that has as many NHMRC investigator holders as ours, or no school. So this is really a unique experience, and here's the picture of just some of them. We also recognise that formal teaching and training is important. So along with work doing your research project with these outstanding researchers, you also will get formal training in research methods and biostatistics. And this will hold you in tremendous stead no matter where your further career takes you, whether you go down the PhD path and have a career in formal, dedicated to medical research, or whether you take another track down, such as down a professional a medical or other career path. Having a good grounding in research methods and how to analyse and interpret data is critically important. And the other aspect is all of our projects are designed to generate publications at the end of it. And the vast majority of our students do. And in an increasingly competitive world, it is for scholarships and for clinical placements, it is incredibly valuable to have publications on your CV. So we work very hard to make sure that's one of the outcomes of your honours experience. So as Steve mentioned, our fabulous honours coordinators at the Central Clinical School, Chris, Margaret and Vilya, will be here to at the end of the session to talk to you about some of the details, and they are an incredibly supportive team, and along with the rest of the school, and helping you through your what can be a challenging but incredibly rewarding year. So hopefully you'll be inspired by some of the research you hear later in the evening, and we'll come and visit and talk to our researchers, and we'll see you all here next year. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor O'Brien.
Thanks, Lakshanie.
Next, I would like to introduce Professor Dragan Ilic, the Director, Teaching of Learning and Head of the Medical Education Research and Quality Unit from the School of Public Health and Preventive Medicine.
Yes, thanks, Lakshanie. First of all, a big welcome to everyone. Thank you very much for joining us on this Tuesday night to hear about the wonderful opportunities that present themselves here at the Alfred Precinct. Firstly, thank you again to Professors Jane and O'Brien for their wonderful and warm introductions. I'm here to provide a bit of an overview, a bit of an entree, if you will, in terms of life, doing your honours project at the School of Public Health and Preventive Medicine. So we're also based predominantly here at the Alfred Precinct, although I just want to clarify we're, I guess, on the St Kilda Road side. So our School of Public Health and Preventive Medicine is based at 553 St Kilda Road. We've got those lovely digs that you can see there in the middle of the slide. The unique thing about, I guess, our school is while the majority of our staff and research is based at 553 St Kilda Road and the Alfred Precinct, we also do have satellite arms. So we've got our institute over at the Monash Medical Centre, headed up by Helena Teed. And the focus there is much more along the lines of translational research in terms of getting evidence and knowing how and I guess the most effective methods of translating that into clinical practice as well as policy and decision making. Another key partner of our school is the Victorian Institute of Forensic Medicine, also commonly known as VIFM, just a short stroll down the St Kilda Road down in South Bank. So again, for all of you who may be inspired by CSI and all things forensic, we'd highly encourage you to consider doing your honours with VIFM in partnership with our school. I've noticed a couple of questions that have been popping up, so I just want to clarify, I guess, the three programs that we do run in terms of honours through our school. The first one being the Bachelor of Medical Sciences, the BMed Sci, the Bachelor of Biomedical Sciences, and the Bachelor of Health Sciences honours. A couple of people have asked, well, can I do an honours degree if I'm not enrolled in one of those degrees? And the one that I would highlight, particularly if you're doing another bachelor's degree, for example, science, psychology, pharmacy, etc., is that we can enrol you in the Bachelor of Health Sciences. So if you're interested, I'd highly recommend that you have a chat with us after this session. I guess one of the great things about working at the School of Public Health and Preventive Medicine is the diversity that we have within the school. We've got over 1,200 staff employed across not only the Alfred site, but also over at the Monash and VIFM precincts. Much like Stephen and Terry have mentioned, we are a leader in research, and specifically public health research, and I'll go into a little bit of detail what that entails, having almost obtained almost $40 odd million each year, which in this current environment is almost a staggering thing to do. We do try and publish as much as possible, and again, I think we'd be leading the way above par when we talk about the number of publications that we have, and that all, combined makes us the biggest school of public health in Australia. So like I mentioned, one of the real key strengths of doing your honours project at our School of Public Health and Preventive Medicine is the diversity available. Not only, I guess, in terms of your training, will we provide you training in both quantitative and qualitative research methodologies, but there's a real opportunity to pick and choose a project that you've got a genuine interest in, whether it be clinical trials and interventions, whether it be global health and emerging planetary health as we speak. We're very much a leader in that field. One of the key strengths of public health is prevention, health promotion and evaluation. So again, that's a key strength of our School of Public Health and Preventive Medicine. We've got the leading school, the leading centre for occupational and environmental health. Strong leaders in all things health services, and of course a leader in climate change and health. But I guess one of the key aspects that we're really recognised, not only nationally but internationally, is our expertise in clinical registries and biobanks. So that really provides an opportunity for you to have a project anywhere on that translational medicine scale that Professor Jane talked about, whether it be from the bench all the way up to the bedside. I guess I would put the challenge out to you to pick a project, and I would be 100% confident that we could cover it at our School of Public Health and Preventive Medicine. Even if someone's interested in underwater basket weaving, I reckon we could probably get together an honours project in that. I joke, but I guess just wanting to highlight the culture and the experience that you'll have if you do undertake honours with us. We think we've got a great school. You'll be in an awesome environment, and one of the key aspects is accessibility to all staff, whether they be academic or professional. We've got not only national but international experts right across the field. As Steve mentioned, not only do we have the current Chief Health Officer, Professor Sutton, as an adjunct within our school, but the wonderful and newly appointed Deputy Chief Health Officer, Professor Alan Cheng, plays a key role with our infectious diseases research unit. So we think, and we're quite proud of the connections that we've got, not only, I guess, from a government point of view, but also in industry, as well as the links that we've got with NGOs as well. And all of this provides you guys with I think anyway, is an awesome opportunity to further your academic studies. If we can go on to the next slide quickly. And I've just got a couple of slides here just to highlight, I guess, some of the divisions that we've got, research divisions within our school. I guess, headline act is the Esprit trial, had over $50 million worth of funding, with the main focus looking at the effects of aspirin in the elderly. But one of the great things about having such a large clinical trial is the opportunity to tap in and to create sub-studies. And so we've got over 14 sub-studies in all things relating to from depression to cancer to genomics and whatnot. As I mentioned, we've got a strong research interest in infectious diseases, headed up not only by Alan Cheng, but the infectious diseases head, Professor Karen Leader. So as you'd expect, all things epidemiology, data science, we've got a very strong focus on. So we've just, again, got a few more studies that we can highlight. As I mentioned, a very, very strong research footprint in all things health services. So we've got, I could almost say, name the discipline, and I think we would probably have the registry associated with it, whether it be from transfusion to prostate registries to bariatric surgery, you name it, we've got it. Once again, unfortunately, with the disasters, and in this particular instance, the Hazelwood disaster of a few years ago, we were one of the first schools in Australia asked to conduct research in terms of the effects of the fires in the coal mines. And again, it's one of the flagship studies that we have in the area of occupational and environmental health. As both Steve and Terry have mentioned, one of the great fillets in our cap is the fact that we are located at the Alfred precinct and obviously have great connections with the hospital itself. And this is demonstrated through our association with the ANZIC research group, who have great connections with all of the staff in critical care. Ranging anywhere from pre-hospital to emergency and trauma research. Next slide, if I can have that one. And then I guess just rounding out the diversity, as I mentioned, we've got not only research implementation headed up by Professor Helena Teed over at the Monash Medical Centre, but also the Victorian and the Department of Forensic Medicine headed up by Noel Wolford and Professor Richard Bassett at the South Bank precinct. We also offer, I guess, areas that are a little bit off the beaten track. So one of my areas of interest is health professions education. So looking at how we educate the next generation of health professionals and how we can do that more effectively. Needless to say, we think public health is awesome. So, please come and talk to us about it. And I think I'll leave it there. Thanks.
Thank you, Professor Ilic, for that overview of the School of Public Health. And Professor Ilic is correct. We will add that link to the YouTube video in the chat function at the end of this session. Next, you have the opportunity to hear from two past honours students, one from the Central Clinical School and the second from the School of Public Health. So first, I would like to introduce you to Miss Alexandra Dvorscek, who will provide her honours experience and is currently a PhD student at the Department of Immunology and Pathology. So take it away, Alex.
Thanks for that, Lakshanie. So as Lakshanie said, my name's Alexandra Dvorscek and I'm currently a first year PhD student in the Department of Immunology and Pathology, and I did my honours last year in the Central Clinical School. So a little bit about me. I did my undergrad at Monash in Clayton, doing a Bachelor of Biomed and Science, majoring in Immunology, Genetics and Molecular Biology. In my last semester of my undergrad, I decided to do a 3990 unit just to get a little bit of a preview of what research might be like and a little taste of what honours also might be like. And I did this in Associate Professor Kim Jacobson's lab, which is a B-cell and antibody memory laboratory. At the end of this, this sparked my interest in B-cells, but I kind of wanted to get out of Clayton, so I came out to look at the Alfred Research Alliance and applied and completed my honours year in the Tarlinton laboratory, which is an immune memory lab under the supervision of Professor David Tarlinton and Dr. Isaac Quast. And this year I'm currently doing my PhD, as I said, in the same lab with the same supervisors looking at the same project. So what is honours? If I kind of had to sum it up, I'd say it's made up of two components. There's a research project component and a coursework component. The coursework takes place over around the first 3 months of the year and makes up around a quarter of your marks, whereas the research project goes for the whole year from March till November-ish, makes up around 75% of your marks, and it's really exciting because what you'll be doing is actually original research. I know not all projects are lab-based, mine was, and in a lab-based project, basically what you'll do is throughout the year, you'll perform experiments that hopefully answer some research questions that you and your supervisors will come up with. And then at the end of the year, you get to present your data to your peers in a seminar and also as a thesis. And honours year really is a whole new university experience. It's not like a typical, your typical undergrad degree, even the prac units that you might have done before. 3990 is a pretty accurate representation in that you've got a lot of independence. It can be hard work, but it's really rewarding. So choosing your project, my advice with choosing your project would be initially to meet with or reach out to potential supervisors based on your interests and the projects that are offered. When you meet with your potential supervisors, I'd really recommend asking about the actual lab work that you would be doing. I think it's something that you'd really need to make sure that you could spend your year working on. Another bit of advice I'd give would be to really make sure you and your supervisors are on the same page in terms of the hours you'd be expected to work, the workload, the kinds of experimental methods you may or may not be comfortable with, such as mouse work or blood work, things like that. And it's going to sound quite trivial, but I'd really recommend choosing supervisors that you get along with. You're going to be spending a lot of time with your supervisors, particularly your kind of postdoc supervisor or your lab-based supervisor. And if you guys get along, it really makes the year a really smooth and fun experience. And if you can, I really recommend that you speak to past and present students from the lab. Misconceptions of the honours year. A big one is that you'll be left on your own. This is absolutely not the case. Your supervisor will teach you everything you need to know. And if they're not around for whatever reason, everyone in the department is super helpful and supportive. You won't be expected to know everything. You'll be taught everything from square one, and you'll really learn as you go in terms of the experimental methods, but also the theory. You'll learn as you read papers, and you're absolutely not expected to go in knowing everything on your project. And honours takes over your life. Again, not the case at all. If you're organised, you can have a really great balance. Next slide, please. So honours at the Alfred Research Alliance, it's really exciting. As highlighted earlier, it's very collaborative. The hospital is obviously a few doors down, and some projects actually do involve receiving patient samples from the hospital, which is really exciting. There are plenty of opportunities here to learn about other topics, such as weekly seminars from internal and external speakers, journal clubs, things like that. As I've highlighted earlier, there's a real lab experience. You really gain a lot of independence. Within the department and the precinct, there's a really great mixture of staff and students, and you're kind of not separated from each other. It's all a very cohesive unit. It opens up a lot of opportunities for the future, whether that be pursuing a PhD, getting some more experience working as an RA, things like that. And again, the culture is great. It's great to get out of Clayton, be central to Melbourne, and come out here and mix it up a bit. So thank you. I know it's a bit rushed, and I'm really happy if anyone does want to email me to hopefully, if I can, answer any questions you might have. And thanks for listening.
Thank you, Alex. That was great. I hope you all learned some very exciting tips from our past honours student from the Central Clinical School. So next we have Miss Georgina Lau, the honours student or past honours student from the School of Public Health and Preventive Medicine, who is a current PhD student at the Pre-Hospital Emergency and Trauma Research from the School of Public Health and Preventive Medicine. So Georgina, go ahead.
Thanks, Lakshanie. So hi everyone, my name is Georgina, and today I'll just be sharing with you a little bit more about my honours experience at the School of Public Health. So just a little bit about me to begin with. So I came from a Bachelor of Biomedical Science, and during that time I'd done a bit of work with the School of Public Health through a Research and Action Unit during my third year, as well as a bit of work as a research assistant. And that really led on to my honours year with the Pre-Hospital Emergency and Trauma Group, where I was looking at personal responsibility for injury events. And then early this year, I began my PhD looking at alcohol and drug use in major trauma patients. So an honours year is really just a year of research after your undergrad degree. And for many people, it's a bit of a transition year from university where you're going to lectures and tutorials to going into a more professional setting. And it's a really great opportunity for you to see if you enjoy doing research. And that's really what it was for me. Having come from a biomedical background, I never expected to end up in public health or injury research. But that said, I'd really enjoyed my experiences with the School of Public Health up until that point. So for me, my honours year was really about seeing if it was an area of research that I could maybe see myself staying in for a little bit longer. So when it comes to choosing your project, there are so many projects across the Alfred Research Alliance that I think it's really important to just start early and take the time to explore your options. Really take the time to meet potential supervisors and don't be afraid to shop around a little bit. So even if you find a project that you're really interested in early on, I think it's still really great to take the time to talk to a couple of potential supervisors, not just to get a feel for whether you actually get along with them, but to actually see whether the way that that supervisor works and the research group that they're in works is going to be a way that works for you and that you'll actually enjoy working in for the year. Another really obvious piece of advice that you'll get a lot is just to pick a topic that interests you. It really does make sitting down to start writing a thesis just that little bit easier. And if you do find a project that's really interesting, don't be intimidated by it if it requires some skills that you don't necessarily have yet, because an honours year is about learning those skills. And I think that really is one of the biggest misconceptions, that it's just a year of research that you have to do on your own. Believe me when I say that you get so much support, not just from your supervisors and the research group that you're in, but also really built into the honours program. For me, I did 6 weeks of coursework in biostatistics, which was incredibly useful. And you have access to a lot of short courses in things like statistical programs like Stata, as well as in qualitative research methods if that's what your project needs. And you also get a lot of ongoing support from the honours coordinators themselves. Another really big misconception is that an honours year is really just for people who want to pursue a career in research. It certainly did end up going down that path for me, but know that a lot of other honours students have gone on to enter the workforce or to pursue further studies in things like medicine or physiotherapy. So even if research isn't your end goal, an honours year is still such a productive year. You've got the opportunity to develop a lot of those professional skills that you'll need when you enter the workforce, as well as the opportunity to potentially publish your findings. I got to present mine at a conference at the end of last year, and they're things that look really great on a CV as well. At the same time, you've got the opportunity to network with some really amazing researchers who have a lot of experience not only in research, but also working across healthcare and industry. So an honours year is really quite a beneficial year for you, even if you don't want to go into research. So finally, I've got my email on the screen. Please feel free to reach out and have a chat, or if you've got any questions, I'm more than happy to try and point you in the right direction. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Georgina. That was really great. And I hope everyone was able to see what the two different honours experiences were like from the different schools, but there's also a lot of similarities as well. So next we have a really special segment coming up called the 3-minute research presentations. Now, as you know, academics do like to talk, maybe a bit too much sometimes. Nevertheless, it's only because we're really interested and passionate about the research we do. So we've provided a really unique challenge for the following academics to be able to present their research across their department or their unit within 3 minutes. So will they be able to meet this challenge or not? You will be the judge. We have an exception to this for the first speaker, who will have 6 minutes to cover all the disciplines across the School of Public Health. So just before I start, within those 3 minutes, the speakers have to, of course, meet that deadline. If they don't meet the 3 minutes, they will hear the sound of a bell. Shamila, can you give a little bit of a preview of what that bell will sound like? Thanks, Shamila. So next, I would like to introduce Associate Professor Joanne Ryan, who is the Group Head of Biological Neuropsychiatry and Dementia Research Unit from the School of Public Health and Preventive Medicine. Go ahead, Jo.
Thank you, Lakshanie. So I'm really glad I've been given 6 minutes, because actually I have a very impossible task to try and provide you with a bit of an overview of the breadth of different research programs we have going on in the school. And as Dragan mentioned earlier, it really is very diverse. So whatever you taste, you can find a project that will suit your interest. And I'm just going to give you some really brief, quick examples of some of the types of research, honours research projects that have already been undertaken in our school. Most important to know is that whatever unit or project you do, it's a really awesome environment, and we're all focused on just making real world impacts. So honours in our school is centred on acknowledging and upskilling, and we offer a range of methods which we apply to pertinent questions in both clinical medicine and public health. So we're home to the largest clinical prevention trials in older individuals. The STARRY clinical trial is still recruiting, and aims to recruit around 10,000 participants. And it's looking at the effects of statin on numerous health outcomes in later life. And the team of STARRY really have a diverse range of honours projects and are happy to take on students. SPRI is another landmark clinical trial. This trial is actually finished recruitment and the main results have been published. But as Dragan touched on earlier, we have a huge amount of data. We're continuing to follow the participants, and we have a number of sub-studies across a diverse range of areas. So I've just given you a little flavour of some of these projects that are ongoing at the moment and which are accepting honours students. So there's studies looking at the impact of social isolation and loneliness, which is really timely given the current COVID restrictions. We have projects looking at how physical activity can modify health outcomes. And my own research interest, which is in dementia risk prediction as well as epigenetic biomarkers. We have a large clinical care research division, which covers pre-hospital emergency and trauma projects. And this is where Georgina is actually working in this area. So some of the examples of projects are looking at recovery from traumatic injury, emergency hospital admissions and critical bleeding, as well as things like nutrition and optimising nutrition during critical illness. While the focus here is on the Alfred Alliance, we do have honours students which are based at the Royal Melbourne Hospital with Professor Leslie's research team, who's really focused on looking at improving outcomes for patients following major surgery. We have current honours students who are working on projects such as the effect of chewing gum to treat nausea and vomiting. As Dragan touched on earlier, in the school we manage over 30 clinical registries. So these are registries which gather really powerful data on health service provision and patient outcomes across a range of medical devices and treatments. I've just highlighted 4 areas here and some of the honours projects that are ongoing at the moment. So these can touch on looking at data in the Victorian Cardiac Outcomes Registry, as well as things like the National Burns Registry and Cystic Fibrosis Registry. So if any of those areas are of interest to you, I strongly recommend you contact Cheryl Grant. I've given the details there for more information. So we have a large multidisciplinary cancer research unit, which comprises, among other people, clinicians and allied health staff. They're really focused on integrating patient-reported outcomes into improvements in clinical care and outcomes for patients. Just one example of a project at the moment is, for example, looking at 3D imaging and seeing whether it can be used to improve early diagnosis of melanoma, and also in surveillance of high-risk individuals. We have a large cardiovascular disease research unit, and their research is really diverse and covers basic clinical and epidemiological research. There's projects, for example, looking at microRNA as biomarkers for cardiovascular disease, as well as things like genetic risk variants and how it could modify cardiovascular disease risk, as well as health economic assessment. We have a musculoskeletal unit, and their research is really focused on looking at the causes and treatment of arthritis and back pain, and some of the range of projects which they're focused on and which honours students could join are listed on the slide there. We have a global and women's health unit, which conducts research in Australia and also the Indo-Pacific region. Their research is really focused on generating evidence to explain health inequalities and translating this into improved health services. So some of the recent honours projects have included things like looking at intimate partner violence during pregnancy in Vanuatu, looking at social economic development in Vietnam, and also the attitudes of young Sri Lankans towards mental health and accessing mental health care. As Dragan touched on as well, we do have, based at the Monash Medical Centre, the Monash Centre for Health Research and Implementation, which in itself is a very large unit, and they do a variety of research, but the four main areas are shown here on this slide. So they have a section devoted more to women and children's health, diabetes and vascular medicine, as well as implementation and healthcare improvement, and research methodologies platform. So the next three slides are going to show you some quite different projects as well. So we have a climate and environment unit, which is really focused on research to understand the link between climate change, environmental change, and health outcomes. So some projects, for example, have looked at air pollution and its association with autism, do mobile phones affect cognitive development in children, and also looking at healthcare workers and firefighters and their longer term health with various exposures. We also have an insurance work health group, which looks at things like return to injury and healthcare and how we can improve outcomes for people following injury at work. And we also have a number of units which I've tried to just regroup here just for time. But these are units such as a large biostatistics unit, health economics, as I mentioned earlier. We also have Cochrane Australia, which is really focused on synthesising research findings. And I've shown Dragan there, who heads the Medical Education and Research Quality Unit. So if you're interested in the research that's looking more around education, there's a number of projects being offered there as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All within your 6 minutes. An amazing feat it was. Next, I would like to introduce Professor Harshal Nandurkar, the head of the Australian Centre for Blood Diseases.
So thank you all. So the Australian Centre for Blood Diseases is the largest hospital-based research department. So remember, we are here to cure mouse diseases, or human diseases, but sometimes we do need mice and sophisticated lab systems. So the co-location of a large research center within the hospital allows us exactly to do that. So for example, if you see a protein or a gene in human disease samples and you want to understand what does it really do, you can walk across to the corridor to the ACBD and then interrogate mice or other sophisticated systems to try and understand its importance in the disease pathology. We have over 100 people divided into 14 large research groups. So the research domains are over these 5 categories: myeloma, leukemia, stem cells, cancer and immune signaling, and thrombosis and vascular biology. You can understand that there is a lot of overlap between the 14 research groups and in these 5 domains, which allows sharing of resources. For example, Professor Curtis, who heads our stem cell lab, has an interest in looking at genetics from the ASPRI blood samples from SPHPM to look for genes that can cause thrombosis. Similarly, we have researchers in the thrombosis and vascular biology unit who have translated their skills in targeting into new probes that can identify cancers early and can design antibodies that can specifically target cancers, leaving alone the normal human tissues. So there's a lot of sharing of ideas between the 14 research domains. So as emphasized by Stephen Jane and Terry O'Brien before me, the main strength of having a co-location is that you can walk across 100 meters and there you're in a lab, or you are in a very sophisticated clinical service. So I have mentioned some dollar figures over here. This is not to brag about us, because such kind of financial success is common within the Central Clinical School. In fact, all over Monash University. But the importance is to highlight that my words about translational research are not hollow. So we've received a lot of funding from NHMRC and MRFF for basic science research, as well as we run a very large, robust clinical trial program. And you can see the funding over here, which allows us to translate really basic science work into a clinical program that improves patient outcomes. So if you all join us in the ACBD, I can assure you that my 14 group leaders and a large number of postdocs will carry you along with them on a very exciting ride along the road of cancer research. Thank you very much. Lakshanie, I think it was less than 3 minutes.
It was well done. If we had prizes, I'd give you one. Thank you very much. Next, we have speaker Professor Helmut Butzkueven, the head of the Department of Neuroscience.
Hi, everybody. It's a real pleasure to talk to you all. Of course, the brain is the most fascinating organ of the human body, but it's also the most challenging, traditionally difficult to study, and now really responsible for many of the health challenges and therapeutic challenges of the future. The Department of Neuroscience is a very large department based at the top of the Alfred Center, which is of course the nicest building in the nicest precinct and the nicest floor. We have 25 research groups, around 200 staff. And what I really want to emphasize to you is the layers of experience that we have in mentoring and facilitating excellent student outcomes and experience. In any one year, we have between 10 and 20, averaging around 15 honors students in the Department of Neuroscience. We have our own Department of Neuroscience honors coordinator, Dr. Vila Jokubaitis, who will be in the hangout later. And we have also around 45 master's and mostly PhD students, as well as, of course, junior and more senior academics. So that really, when you're joining a team with us, you're getting a breadth of experience across the whole range of the academic spectrum, and a lot of experience in supervision. Some of the highlights, and you'll find a lot of these, of course, in the honors projects, is epilepsy research, and really the theme is understanding why epilepsy occurs in the first place, and also understanding why or how we can better predict treatment responses in people with epilepsy to really avoid the ultimate terrible outcome of chronic untreatable long-term seizures, which of course have a huge impact on people's quality of life. And this is a disease that affects about 1% of the population. We have a huge research group interested, or multiple research groups interested in traumatic brain injury. Everything from, of course, major trauma, such as car accidents, but also mild to moderate concussion, such as occurs on sporting fields. The outcomes of which are sometimes quite terrible, and where really better biomarkers of outcomes and better treatments are urgently required. We are superb at imaging the brain, all the way from mouse to human, using PET scans, MRI scans, and really understanding structure and function and that relationship to disease. We have a boutique, a wonderful research group focusing on the eyes and the connection of the eyes to the nervous system. And one of the diseases that they've prominently been studying is a terrible disease where people start to perceive their vision as snow, and it's basically snowing all the time. So we're really amongst the world leaders in understanding this curious and sometimes quite devastating illness, and really unraveling the mystery of that. My own background is in multiple sclerosis. We have a huge clinical and research group, including multiple sclerosis genomics. And we're really about personalizing risks and benefits of treatments with understanding some of the physiology of pregnancy and many other projects associated with that. We have another group that's leading a national autoimmune encephalitis study. So this is a rare disease, often affecting young people, more frequently women than men, which can have absolutely devastating consequences of chronic epilepsy, brain injury type consequences, and chronic unemployment. And we really need to understand and treat that disease better. That research group has recently been awarded more than $2 million to really set up and study the biology of this disease in greater detail. Also, we have a strong interest in brain tumors and inflammation and many other projects, and I'm sure I'm out of time. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. Just a little over. I'm not sure if you heard the bell, but that's okay.
I plead ignorance. I didn't hear it. Sorry.
Okay. Thank you. Well, now we can move on to the next speaker, Dr. Brian Drew, the group head of the Molecular Metabolism and Aging Laboratory from the Baker Institute.
Thank you. Oh, hopefully you can hear me. So thanks very much. It's wonderful to see so many people logged on, and also for the opportunities and the work that Lakshanie and Central Clinical School have put into this evening. As Lakshanie mentioned, I'm Associate Professor Brian Drew from the Baker Heart and Diabetes Institute. And for me, it doesn't really feel that long ago that I was contemplating the same decisions that many of you probably are right now regarding your future. But I can say one thing absolutely for certain, that it wasn't over a very exciting online forum such as this. And if I'm being really honest, it probably didn't even involve a computer. But I did make the decision to join the Baker as a PhD student, and actually here I find myself now as an associate professor, head of my own lab of about 15 people, and I also chair the Research Training and Education Committee. And one of the reasons I chose the Baker over others is the Institute has a 90-year history in medical research in Melbourne, which you probably weren't familiar with, and it's one of the leading institutes in the Southern Hemisphere for the study of cardiovascular disease and diabetes. It has been involved in many pioneering advances, really, such as being involved in the first heart transplants in Australia, discovering that there were two forms of diabetes, such as type 1 and type 2 diabetes, and discovery of new classes of drugs for the treatment of high blood pressure. The Institute has about 350 employees across 30 different research groups that range from discovery science to novel drug testing and clinical studies. And this means that we can accommodate projects across all aspects of medical research and maintain a student body each year of approximately about 65 students. So a really nice sized group of students that range from honours, masters and PhD. And the student group has an active student committee who engages with upper management, and this helps to nurture and develop the careers of the students, whilst also providing a social and professional environment. And as a government-funded research institute, our studies are really strongly focused on research outcomes that positively impact human disease. And indeed, our director, Tom Marwick, comments that a key requirement for our research is that it's translatable and offers urgent solutions to health problems. And so what do we offer for the students? And I think this was touched on earlier, that we have internationally recognised researchers who are the supervisors of the projects. We have access to state-of-the-art lab-based and clinical research facilities, and we have multiple cutting-edge technologies for projects on the leading edge of scientific discovery. So you'll be doing original research on really important studies. We also have a strong interaction at the Institute with academia and industry, and this helps to support our translational discoveries and to develop better diagnostics and therapeutics for the areas that we work in. There are also several opportunities for top-up funding and access to travel grants, mini research grants and professional development funds. So there is opportunity for more personal development, professional development. So if this sounds of interest to you, please check out our projects online through the links provided or check out our website. Thank you for the opportunity.
Well, thank you for that presentation, all within time. Well done. Next, I would like to introduce Professor James Beeson, the Deputy Director of the Burnet Institute.
Okay, thanks. Welcome, and thanks to all of you for joining this session. Great that you're able to join this online forum, a different approach. Yeah, there we go. So look, Burnet Institute, it's a medical research institute, over 400 people. We're based here on the Alfred campus, but we also have offices and programs overseas, particularly in Myanmar and Southeast Asia region and Papua New Guinea in the Pacific, but actually in a number of other countries as well. We offer projects and work across a broad areas of expertise, which we call disciplines. So that's in life sciences or biomedical research, public health or population health research, and in international development. And we have a very wide range of projects and programs addressing major health issues. And we organise those into these 4 main health programs, which you can see on the screen: maternal and child health, which includes adolescent health as well now. Disease elimination program, which mainly focuses on several major infectious diseases: HIV, viral hepatitis, Hep B and C, malaria, and now of course COVID-19. We have a large program on COVID. There's the Behaviours and Health Risk program, which focuses on reducing the harms of alcohol and other drugs, and also addressing issues around sexual health and mental health. And then our health security program, which is really focused mainly on infectious disease threats to health in our region, and including Australia, but our regional neighbours. We have a big program there on tuberculosis, with multi-drug resistance being a major issue. Antimicrobial resistance is a big issue globally, and of course COVID-19 amongst our regional neighbours. So being a student at Burnet, well, yeah, what's it like? You've heard from a few people already, and from some current and past students, which is really helpful. Well, we've got an environment of excellence in biomedical research, public health research, and in international research and health programs. So you get really an opportunity across a diverse range of health issues or research skills. So there's great opportunities there for different types of projects depending on your interests. You can experience research that's translated into clinical practice, public health programs and policy, or into new health products and tools like vaccines or diagnostics or new drugs. So we're very focused on finding solutions, finding outcomes. Sometimes it may take many years, other times we see them in the more near term. We've got a strong culture for supporting education and career development of our students and our early career researchers and other staff. And there's a wide range of opportunities and supports for students, travel grants and seminars and opportunities to develop your research skills and advance your career. And of course, fantastic links across the campus here with all the partners that some of whom you've heard from already. And there are a lot of our projects are in partnership with other partners on campus. So just really to give you a bit more flavour of what it's like to do a project at Burnet, I've just listed some examples of students from the past. We've had, students, Lyria Kurtovic, for example, worked on understanding immunity to malaria, is now working on vaccine trials and how vaccines are working in Africa. Elisa Pedrana did a PhD around bloodborne viruses, worked overseas, and has come back now leading projects on elimination of hepatitis C. Danielle Horanayak worked on drugs and spent time overseas before coming back. And Jasper's actually just finished his PhD and will hopefully be doing a postdoc overseas when travel restrictions lift. So I hope that gives you a flavour of the sort of work we're doing and opportunities that you have. Thanks.
Thank you very much for that. It was slightly over time, but I didn't know you could really hear the bell. So is that another save? We'll have to think about that. Next, I have the pleasure of introducing Professor Mark Cooper, who is the head of the Department of Diabetes.
Thanks. It's Mark Cooper here. I want to talk a bit about diabetes. Could we go to the next slide? So we've been hearing all about common diseases. Unfortunately, diabetes is one of the worldwide pandemics, affects 1 in 11 people. And many of you would be hearing a lot about diabetes at the moment during the COVID epidemic, because diabetes and obesity are the major risk factors for mortality related to COVID. So our department has a strong research interest, also education. We do a lot in commercialization, and we also collaborate worldwide. Our major focus is actually on the complications of diabetes, because unfortunately, if you're diagnosed with diabetes, a major reduction in your lifespan is related to the complications. So if you develop diabetes, let's say at the age of 60, you'll lose at least 6 years in lifespan. But we all know, most of us will know someone with diabetes, either type 1, juvenile diabetes, or maturity onset diabetes, or late onset type 2 diabetes. So our group, as we've been hearing from many others, has a translational focus. We started very basic levels from cells to animal models of diabetes. Our group is very well respected in the area of animal models of both type 1 and type 2 diabetes and complications of diabetes, including heart disease, kidney disease, and atherosclerosis. And we use an integrated approach where we will start with cells, move to animals, and then ultimately are linked to patients. We already heard from the other departments that there are clinical trials in diabetes, and many of our discoveries have ultimately ended up becoming contemporary clinical trials. So I think I just wanted to give a very brief talk because I know I was expecting most people would be well past their 3 minutes, but I just want to emphasize we're an integrated team of clinicians, basic researchers, trying to solve one of the major pandemics worldwide, which is diabetes and its complications. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much. Next, I'd like to introduce Professor David Tarlinton, the head of the Department of Immunology and Pathology.
Thanks, Lakshanie, and welcome everyone. It's my great pleasure to be able to speak to you about the activities going on in my department, the Department of Immunology and Pathology here at the Central Clinical School. If I could have, thank you very much, way ahead of the game. Just a minute, I'd just like to take a minute of my 3 to explain why there might be immunology sitting within such an obviously clinically focused entity as the Central Clinical School and the Alfred campus. Well, I think it's because the immune system is increasingly understood to be at the nexus of a lot of clinical conditions, both in the response to the environment and the response to self, and either is causative or involved in the increase in pathology of a number of clinical conditions. And if that's not the case, then the immune system is increasingly being found to be a means by which one can develop therapeutics and diagnostics for these clinical conditions. So that's effectively why one would want to have an immune department or an immunology department within a clinical setting. Immune system, as I said at the top of this slide, is an incredibly complicated thing. It's very difficult to encompass the entire object in a single department, and ours is a relatively small boutique department in that context. But it provides enormous opportunities for studying all aspects effectively of biology, both through development, through differentiation, and through the use of the system in translational outcomes. At the bottom, I've got what I think is really sums up my philosophy about the immune system. If it's not actually the question you're interested in, it's almost certainly the answer to that problem, whatever that might be. So if I could have the next slide. So moving from that rather wordy description of the immune system to a more pictorial one, one has to visualize the immune system in some way in order to conceptualize how you're going to study it. And you can view it as a collection of cells that interact or that collectively form the immune system and interact with the body to maintain that homeostasis. And that recognition is both in failing to react to self, which is tolerance, and recognizing foreign objects and responding to them, which is immunity. And it's the imposition of those 2 outcomes, which is effectively immunology. When it works well, one has, as I just said, tolerance to self and immunity to foreign objects, and that's perfect. But it's at the points where it's not working so well, where either foreign objects are not recognized or where self is not tolerated, that disease and pathology can manifest. And that's where it's most engaging, if you like, as a research topic and as a means of developing diagnostics and therapeutics. So you can see at the bottom underneath that, we have tolerance, disease, and immunity as those outcomes. And through the study of those immune phenomena, we can develop mechanisms of disease, better diagnostics, and potentially therapeutics. On the right-hand side of the slide shows the 7 lab heads that operate within the Department of Immunology and Pathology. Those that are offering projects will be available in the breakout room. And the areas that we study, that we specialize in, are listed in the middle. And I think you can see that they're really at the interface between the immune system and the environment, sort of mucosal or surface areas. And we're all using our expertise and specializations to develop insights into diseases in those areas. So looking forward to seeing you in another 10 or 15 minutes or so, and back to you, Lakshanie.
Thank you very much. Ooh, 5 seconds. Very nice. Next, I'd like to introduce Associate Professor Joseph Doyle, the Group Leader at the Department of Infectious Diseases.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for having me. I think I get one of the easier gigs tonight, trying to convince students to come and work in infectious diseases in the middle of a pandemic. So let's go on to the first slide, and I'll give you a quick overview of our hospital and university department. The Department of Infectious Diseases sits at the Alfred Hospital, right in the middle of the precinct, and is connected both with the university and with many of Monash's partners, including the Burnet Institute particularly, and other hospitals like Monash Medical Centre and Eastern Health and Epworth Healthcare. And the main focus of our department, with its 120 staff and 35 infectious diseases physicians, is mainly around providing clinical care and the research which is all embedded and associated with that sort of work. So our main focus in the hospital is around general infectious diseases, which includes some really exciting exotic things like return travellers and the infections they get, as well as being the base for the statewide HIV service. So we have a huge expertise and number of people who work in that area. But also, you've already heard a lot about immunity and a bit about cancer and hematology. A lot of those areas end up with infections related to them. And because the Alfred has such a breadth of experience in this space, our immunocompromised host service is one of the largest as well, and there's a huge opportunity for infections in that area. And the last area I want to touch on was infection prevention, because right now in the middle of COVID, we have a huge role in providing care in the community, supporting the aged care facilities in our area, in fact, literally managing the response for some of those services. And as Professor Jane mentioned at the start, one of our professors is now the acting Deputy Chief Health Officer. Has been seconded for a few months to help manage that response. So there's a huge wealth of experience across those disease areas. And the research which hangs off that is both clinical. It's also got a basic science component, as we have a growing number of people who work in the lab aspects of infectious diseases, particularly around antibiotics and resistance. And also at the other end of the research spectrum in public health, and I sit more at that end doing more clinical work and public health work, where you're looking more at epidemiology, about changing health systems and the impact of research on health policy. So if we go to the next slide, you can get a sense of all of the different groups that operate within infectious diseases. I've touched on a few of them, but I just wanted to highlight HIV, because HIV in Australia, since it was first discovered in the 80s, there's been a very large focus of clinical research in Melbourne at the Alfred. We have a number of people who work across our campus in HIV, into working with colleagues in how HIV impacts on aging, how it impacts on cancer, endocrinology and heart disease, as well as the public health, the modelling impacts of what HIV might happen, and the prevention science, things like pre-exposure prophylaxis, which many of you may have heard as a way of preventing HIV, and some of those interventions, which are now actually commonplace, have been things which in Australia and in Melbourne have been pioneered at the Alfred. So HIV is a really strong area, and I'd suggest that there'd be many topics in the book that people could look at. Another area I want to touch on, because I do this work, is viral hepatitis. And viral hepatitis, with the fantastic drugs we have now, is a curable disease for hepatitis C and a very treatable disease for Hep B. And there's work all the way across the precinct, from basic science through clinical research and really in the health systems and translation. It's how we can get Australia toward elimination. There's plenty of work in our book there. And the last area I wanted to touch on is respiratory disease, because COVID is obviously there right now. In a way, I'd almost say that we have a department where your project will be future-proofed, because some of our students this year have had to change onto a COVID topic, and there is just so much work going on right now, from the clinical care, epidemic modelling. We have projects in the field right now in terms of how to treat people in community setting, getting dressed up in all the protective equipment and going to someone's home to deliver treatment. We have projects on how to prevent it using post-exposure drugs. We have projects on how to optimise people's health when they're living in quarantine and support particularly the most vulnerable patients, as well as I alluded to, the infection prevention and the policy work which many of the team in our department work on. So I'd recommend people look at the project book and have a look at some of the topics there and join us in the discussion section soon. I don't think you'd be disappointed, and we'd be able to give you some work, whether it's in any of these areas or in COVID next year if you came and joined us.
Thank you very much. Next, I'd like to introduce speaker Professor Jayashri Kulkarni, the head of the Department of Psychiatry.
Good evening, everybody. It's fantastic to be able to speak with you, and I actually also enjoyed hearing about what's going on in all the other departments, because of course psychiatry is everywhere. So this is your opportunity. If you want to have some blue sky thinking, come and work in psychiatry. Unlike some of the other, well, most of the other fields, you're really critical in terms of doing something that can really move this field forward. Unfortunately, psychiatry has not really moved forward terribly much in the last little while. And at Monash, in particular in this department, what we do is we take the opportunity to actually use the latest discoveries in neuroscience particularly, but also, you know, we work happily with our anaesthetic friends and people in allergy all over the actual CCS huge family, as well as social and preventive medicine and public health. So psychiatry is everywhere. So it doesn't really matter what you want to do. You will be able to find something in psychiatry that will be able to make a difference, because this is the revolution. This is the area that's fallen behind in terms of moving forward. We really need to do better for people who have trauma, people who have schizophrenia, people who have addictions, people who have body image problems, a whole range of things. And how do we do this? We do this across the Alfred, we do it across Epworth by utilising the latest of the latest in technologies, the latest of the latest in terms of thinking about biomarkers. How are you actually going to tell whether someone's significantly depressed? At the moment, it's a matter of opinion. We need to get better, and we need you, the next generation, to actually come on board and help us with this revolution. So I'm not going to go on and much further, because I know that Kit Fairley is talking about sex next, and of course that is a major draw card, very hard to compete with sex as the next talk. But what I want to tell you is that if you want to be at the vanguard of a revolution, if you want to make your mark and be forever known as that particular honours student that started the brand new whiz-bang test for depression or schizophrenia or anxiety, and the brand new whiz-bang treatment that's effective for a whole range of mental health conditions in a field that is huge and growing, come on board and join us in psychiatry research at the Central Clinical School. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much. Wow, that was really motivating as well. I thought I saw Orlando Bloom in your slides, actually. Was it just my mind playing tricks of me? It was very, very nice to see. Next, I'd like to introduce Professor Christopher Fairley, the head of the Melbourne Sexual Health Centre.
Hello, everyone. Call me Kit. First slide, please. So I suspect most of you haven't been to Melbourne Sexual Health Centre. At least you won't necessarily admit that to anyone if you have. But we're located in Carlton at 580 Swanson Street. We're the largest service in Australia, one of the largest in the world probably. We see probably about 50 to 60,000 people a year, about 100 staff all the way through from the admin staff, IT, nurses and the doctors. And we have a very strong research output, probably about 120 papers a year. And that day that you can see there with us, with the flag, was the wonderful day to celebrate marriage equality. And you'll find we're all great progressive thinkers. So if you want to come to our centre, what you'll get is a project with existing data, the ethics will be organised for you in advance. You'll get a first author publication. I think of the 100 or so students who've come through, we've only been 1 or 2 who haven't had a first author paper. The only people who haven't are people who've run off elsewhere. And you'll get great supervision. You'll find we're an incredibly friendly first name sort of group of individuals. And I ask you, if you're worried about anything, just talk to any of the previous students who have come to the service and ask them what we were like. So I just want to give you an example of what people got out of it. So I've just chosen 4 of the more recent students. So Evelyn came and she got a nice paper in PLOS 1 showing that it really wasn't necessary from a cost-effective perspective to examine sex workers when they come for certificates. Chloe showed that with oral sex now becoming a much more important part of sexual relationships, particularly in younger people, that type 1 herpes is a strong predominance over type 2. Emile got a lovely data set that goes back 100 years and showed what happened to sexually transmitted infections in the last 100 years, including returned servicemen from the First World War and the Second World War, the HIV epidemic and so forth. And David Priest got 4 papers actually in his year with us. One of those was published in sexually transmitted infections. So we do essentially guarantee that you'll have a project with existing data, you'll get a first author publication, and you'll be with a whole lot of warm and friendly people. Thanks.
Thank you very much. That was the final presentation for the Information Evening webinar. I'd like to thank all the speakers who spoke tonight, especially the ones that spoke within the 3-minute presentation category. It's always a challenge to explain your research, and especially research that's happening within the department and unit within 3 minutes, but I think everyone did a fantastic job. If you have any further questions, please contact us through the Central Clinical School or School of Public Health Student Services email. And other than that, thank you very much for attending, and I hope you have a good night, and maybe we might see you all next year. Thank you very much.